All right, we got some new dictatorships, just nothing new in the history of the human race. They come and rarely go until the good guys come along and all that stuff and the white hats. But with the utter failure of the Allies, including the United States, to do anything about anything concrete or political about restoring or establishing any kind of order in Europe after World War I. The economic stress is so bad, this of course leads to all kinds of extremist movements, far left and far right, coming up with an alternative for the collapsed empires. Italy was especially bitter over the Treaty of Versailles, although I have to say, editorial comment, I don't know why. They stayed out of the war after they promised to fight with the Germans and ended up coming in on the Allied side, and they didn't get certain territorial concessions up here at the expense of Austria. So they were very unhappy, felt like the war had been fought for nothing. And so they turned to a new political ideology that basically they created called fascism. Fascism is taken from the Latin fasces, which was the symbol of the Roman Empire. And that symbol is a bundle of rods tied together with a axe through the top of it. In other words, cutting wheat, Roman Empire, symbol of prosperity, but that was the Roman emperor himself was identified with that. And of course the fascist movement in Italy decides that it wants to create a new Rome based on Italy to bring about not only prosperity but prestige. So that's the Italian situation. This is a very reactionary government. There's still 2 or 3 of you in this class who don't seem to understand political extremism. Better look at your last handout I gave you on those, because this is as far right as you go. Fascism. Mussolini did not belong to the Benito Mussolini at first didn't belong to the fascist party, but after the war he did join up and became the leader of the Italian fascist party. Not only did they adopt the Roman symbol, but they adopt the salute, Hail Caesar, as their salute, and the Germans would pick that up, Sieg, Heil, Hail Victory, or this way, but that's all, the Roman image. And Hail Caesar, Hail Mussolini. He hired his own black shirts, he called them thugs, a gang of deadbeats who went around beating up people who did not vote for them in local elections, did not support Mussolini and the party, or just wanted to have a good time on the town. I mean, these guys are the riffraff of society. It happens in every society. But Mussolini and these, they call them black shirts because they dressed in black shirts. They didn't carry weapons at first, just, sticks and stones, and then, of course, started getting weapons. But they and Mussolini bullied the King of Italy into appointing Mussolini as the Prime Minister in 1922. But we might as well know the name that he gave himself, which was Il Duce, the leader. Okay, that gets right to the point. But basically he began to, I'll say this once, and I've said it before, I shouldn't say it again, but, the Italians are always trying to say something nice about this guy, and he made the trains run on time. He was very efficient. We now know he did not. But anyway, that's part of the mythology you get out of this stuff. Very efficient. But the fascists in Italy and every other fascist movement in the 20s and 30s and 40s were against every other political ideology, party, form of government, every other kind. They're against liberalism, democracy, against communism. Remember Nietzsche and everything said, it's weak when you distribute the wealth. They want power. They're very Nietzschean. They're against big business, capitalism. But Italy's got to do that if they're going to compete, but anyway, they're against that. They're against cities, anti-urban. This tells you right away, volumes. They're rural people, very conservative, farmers. As we've seen throughout history, farmers tend to be very conservative, and they certainly are. This is where the grassroots, that's a good term for these, grassroots movement coming from the farmers, very frustrated and don't like what's going on in the city. And finally, of course, therefore, wanting to be racially pure, they're anti-Semitic to the core. No use for the Jews, who basically capitalists and urban people. So there's that. So it's one-man rule under the leader, a typical dictatorship. So we've seen him before, and to tick off the things that he did, what you need to know. He had his own army, he had his own, bodyguard, you might say, thugs. And when anybody stepped out of line, of course, the black shirts would punish or eliminate them. And now, of course, with the head guy allowing this. So it's the official policy. And they were so tough, these black thugs, that they even ran a certain bunch of toughs from Sicily out of Italy and Sicily. The mafia. Now that's certainly a good thing. And guess where they went? Where in the U.S.? Chicago. All right, okay, and all the cities, the mafia. So we've got, thanks Mussolini for nothing, okay. So, but he's that tough. He's a real dictatorship. So he's got this great army of thugs helping him. Second thing, he centralized the economy into what he called a corporate state. Now that's one of those twists of phrase, corporate state. Well, that implies corporation, a capitalist system. But what he did was take the 22 leading corporations in Italy, the most successful businesses, the richest, and brought them all under the control of the government. So it's kind of a halfway capitalism. They're allowed to do their thing, but the whole system, the corporations, 22 of them now, but the whole system, mainly 22, were regimented on the pretext of efficiency, like making the trains run on time. So anything you bought, sold, made, produced, anything, had to go through the government, everything. So you've got government inspectors, spies, and all that. So that's the way he handled that. You've got some private enterprise, but only with the approval of the party and Mussolini. The third thing, let me ask you, dictatorship, of course, we've seen throughout history, what kind of religious policy do they have? How many religions? One, okay. You're thinking for a money. Very good. One thought. That's your thought for the day. Okay. Guess which one? Catholic, of course. This is Rome, the head of the church. So, as far as Mussolini's concerned, it is the state church. Being conservative in many social ideas and so on, the fascist party had no use for birth control, no use for divorce, undermine the family. Will the Catholic Church agree with that?